Everybody, this is Kathleen Scott, and welcome to the Kathleen Scott Podcast. Today, I'm going to update our prior podcast episode where we talked about how President Trump was faring in the courts with all of his legal challenges. And we gave the statistics in the lower courts, the district courts, federal courts, as well as the Supreme Court. Well, on February 20th, some things changed. The Supreme Court struck down the executive orders that Trump issued allowing for tariffs. And so in a 6-3 opinion, there's 9 justices on the Supreme Court, 6 of them agreed to strike them down, finding squarely that only Congress has the power to enact a tax, and that tariffs are a tax. And there were 3 dissenting opinions. It's a very lengthy opinion. There's a lot of detail in it. And essentially, the law at the center of the case, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the court said does not allow the president to enact tariffs. A couple of things I want to highlight for you. When we were giving the statistics earlier in our earlier podcast, those were mostly shadow docket opinions. So this opinion differs because this had the benefit of a full briefing, oral argument, all the justices meeting together and issuing this opinion. A couple other interesting points about this. The Supreme Court does not discuss at all what happens, whether or not there's any obligation to repay the tariffs. In a dissenting opinion, Kavanaugh asks the question and discusses it, but there's no outcome and there's no final decision making on that point. I also found it interesting that Justice Roberts went through a lot of intellectual background and detail in prior Supreme Court rulings involving the president's ability and limitation on taxing and spending. He went through some of the Biden opinions where the court ruled squarely against Biden when he tried to enact laws like the one where the student loans were going to be tax-free. That was struck down, and he used some similar reasoning. And I thought that was an important time, since our country is so splintered right now, to go back and make sure that the court is applying the same precedents and the same laws in a consistent manner. That was something remarkable. Something else, and I feel like it's been a little underreported, is that repeatedly in this opinion, the Chief Justice, writing for the majority of the court, outlines that President Trump does not have this power, but also states during peacetime. And so it's interesting that we now find ourselves in war with Iran, and there's going to be this question that should be asked, which is, does the president's power during wartime change? And I think even the court acknowledged that, yes, the president can have greater ability to regulate things when we're at war. So it remains to be seen how the president will use that and how that will square with this opinion. So more to come on this as we continue to go through this together. I really appreciated the thoughtful comments and questions on the episode related to how Trump is faring in the courts. So I'm going to take a minute and kind of address some of the comments and also some of the questions. Keep them coming. I know there's a lot of negative feedback out there about judges, and but I do want to point out that, like on this tariff opinion, the court got it right. That's a very difficult opinion, right? And they had to sit in front of this president, some of them who came during the State of the Union, and have him point a finger and scowl and say things. So it's like, you have to give credit where credit is due. They are appointed. They were appointed by, many of them appointed by the president, but they're still following the law, even if that means they're going against the president. Now, I've had much beef with some of the opinions from this court. And I think, and I've had on this podcast, I have called out where I thought opinions were intellectually dishonest, and it felt like the court was bending at a pretzel to get to the outcome that it wanted. I felt that way about the decision about reproductive rights, for example. Every person, every human has bias. We have bias baked in us. We have bias that we don't even know we have. And so judges are not superhuman. I think the judges that I know and that I'm in front of strive hard to do the right thing and to follow the law. I also think it matters what judge you're talking about. So some of the politics gets left behind, especially federal judges. What I mean by that is federal judges are appointed for life. They don't need political favor anymore. They have that job until they die. So there isn't any need to pander or to have job security or to make rulings to further their career. They are going to be a federal judge forever. Now, they may have aspirations to be placed on an appellate bench or on a Supreme Court bench, and maybe that sways their opinion. But in general, it doesn't get any more job security than, job for life. So that's an interesting fact. State court judges in the state of Florida are, vacancies can be appointed by the governor, but they're elected. And so even if they're originally appointed, they still have to be elected. And so that, in my view, makes a lot of state court judges a lot more like feet on the ground and much more understanding about people's issues, right? And because they are elected, that is a nice check on their behavior to be overly political, because if we don't focus on the judges' political party so much, that we focus on their demeanor, their outcome, how they run their courtroom, how quickly they're getting people hearings, how many of their cases are too old and too long in their docket. I appreciate the comment about the litigiousness of Donald Trump, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. In my career, I've actually sued the Trump administration for wages not being paid to employees, and I think I had another claim involving firing an employee who complained about harassment at one of his locations. And it makes him a very experienced litigator, right? Very seasoned, and that factors into his judgment. He's not afraid to use the courts to get what he wants. He's not afraid to challenge things in the courts. And most lawyers will tell you, even if you think you're right on the law of the facts, you get rulings from judges that weren't expected. So this is a gambler's response, right? Let's roll the dice. Let's use the courts as many times as we can and hope that we get lucky. And sometimes filing a lawsuit isn't necessarily like what the win is about, getting the right outcome. Sometimes the lawsuit itself is the win, making that public, the position, serving the base. So I'm not an advisor to Trump, so that's just my opinion as an attorney. I'm Kathleen Scott, and this has been an update for you. Thank you so much.